Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. As I struggle to say my name properly, but more importantly, we have a lot to get into in the long-term analysis for Bitcoin, as a lot hinges upon not just today's closure, which is also going to be a 5-day closure and a weekly closure, but what that means for the next few weeks to come, and also follow up on the lower-term time frame analysis as well, of which we would get the bounce that we were expecting yesterday, and what that means for the shorter-term time frames. Anyways, before we get into that, I would like to wish you the best and the happiest, because everyone could fucking use it in these times in the world. And more importantly, or just as important, I should say, I want to get into the actual content of the day. But before that, I should let you know that we obviously have the premium features live on the Krown trading application. You can find them in the link in the description below. And of course, you can learn more about them and what to expect in the Learn More tab. Basically gives you more pertinent information for the underlying market dynamics and faster data feeds and, well, the Joule Light indicator as well, alongside the newsletter, which again, I want to give that as much credit as it deserves, because it's truly actually Mr. Rogers, he's been killing it on the newsletters. And if you actually backtest his analysis, been absolutely incredible, as he covers a lot more things in just the distant cryptocurrency lands like NFTs and whatnot as well. Anyways, cool. All right, so let's first start off with the lower term timeframes. I want to get this nice and streamlined here and follow up on yesterday's short-term time frame analysis. Bitcoin was trading just below $39,000 at about 38.8, 38.9. When we recorded our video yesterday, we said this is a likely bounce area for the short-term timeframes. Bounce, again, not the same thing as reversal. The reversal conditions are still very far away, but we'll discuss that soon enough. But ultimately, that was coming off of the 382 Fibonacci retracement in this bearish retracement right here, as you can see. And that is kind of where, you do expect a bit of a short-term bounce in that case. We said anywhere around the 0.5 in this blue box territory right here is fair game. We got right in the middle of there, it looks like, in the, what was the night for myself, which actually last night, I was up the latest time I've been up since, it's got to be a year or two, actually. I was up till 12, in fact, going out to a nice birthday party of Elsa's friends. Anyways, happy birthday, Suvi. She's got very nice feet as well, for the feet appreciators out there. What's funny about that? Anyways, it's like a serious thing. Anyways, we got that bounce and got a rejection from it subsequently. What does that mean for the short-term timeframes? It means more or less the same thing. As far as the range goes, range resolution on the short-term timeframes would be an hourly closure above 39,900 or an hourly closure below the 382 right here at about 38,500. One of those two conditions, if met on a closing basis for at minimum an hourly, preferably a little bit higher term timeframe than that, would indicate the next sort of continuation conditions with targets to the upside at around $41,000, or if downside is resolved, targets down to about somewhere between about low 37 to mid 37, so 37.5 to about low, like 37,100 or so. Anyways, until then, lower term timeframes, more or less the same as kind of what we looked at yesterday. We're just seeing the range sort of formulate itself. Anyways, if we go look at our stochastic momentum oscillators over here, we will notice, we won't notice because we're on higher term timeframes. There we go. Let's go down to a 4-hour. We actually will notice that 4-hour stochastic momentum, while it is within the very critical zone right here and really wouldn't take too much to get it turned up, we do see that it's actually on the verge of turning down again with any sort of a closure below 38,940, which is coming in about 2 hours, 35 minutes, and 55 seconds. Obviously, that's an eternity in cryptocurrency land. I wouldn't make any, analysis on that at this exact moment right now. But let's go measure that up against the other lower term timeframes and see if there's any, sort of rhyme or reason with this, of which the 6-hour in the same sort of posture here also presented around the same region as well, about just below 39,000 bucks. 3-hour is suggesting what? Is suggesting downside below about 38,900. Bi hourly is going to be suggesting what as well, is going to show downside below 39.3 actually, and hourly is going to be actually nosediving below 39.4. So if we do start to see closures and settles below those regions on lower term timeframes, I do kind of favor short term time frame, at least testing down around the low from, I guess this was actually this morning, at least for myself at 6 a.m. The wick low of this current short-term range, basically the 382 yet again. If we do start to see closures below there, again, I do look for extension down towards this blue box territory, basically mid to low $37,000 before the next short-term time frame bounce. And again, for what it's worth, if Bitcoin were to start to close above 39 300. I think a lot of those short-term timeframes, stochastic momentums, were pivoted around. It wouldn't necessarily be an upside continuation condition. It would obviously, look better than just going straight down, of course, but I still want to see an hourly closure, specifically above our targeted region from yesterday, which is just below 39 800 and a half or so, or 850 basically. If we start to see that, then yes, I do look for those to start to turn in the same direction. Obviously, you can see that they're all sort of in the critical region, and it really wouldn't take too much to get a nice little bounce solo right there. But until then, we're a lot closer to the downside resolution of this, and well, I think that does it for that. We can quickly look at indicators over here, of which we do see that volatility is fully contracted on the hourly and looking for expansion right here, already above the moving average on it. And well, that is coming alongside of, well, I mean, we've kind of already got this signal right here, but that hidden bearish divergence signal. And I imagine that if we do start to see, the other lower term timeframes settle below, basically 39,000 bucks or so on the next 4 hour and 6 hour closing basis, we very likely do see that expansion come with another test at minimum of the downside, and probably a break and resolution of the downside as well. Anyways, I'm curious to see if the other lower term timeframes are suggesting a similar picture. 4 hours still suggesting a little bit more of a corrective move right here than anything else, as we do see volatility start to come down off of extremes, off of 1, 2, 3, so thrice extremes right there. So I do look at this as a corrective move first and foremost, and well, that would be, I suppose, your next lower high. And 6 hour, I suspect, is doing very likely the same thing. Yeah, coming off of extremes here as well. So looking for a corrective move. I think that we kind of got that in the early morning hours for myself over here in Helsinki, and well, I suppose that kind of does it for the short-term timeframes. Anyways, let's get into the long-term analysis here. There's a lot to speak about. I do want to make this as level-headed as possible, because I do believe that with the current situation in the world, there are legitimate fundamental things to be aware of in a way that we typically don't have to be aware of, right? With, of course, potential World War III going on. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. Obviously, I don't know, but I don't know how serious that actually is. But obviously, these situations can produce some rather violent reactions in the market. So in these sort of situations, I like to look for the more obvious signals that produce an edge, rather than just trying to, guess where things are going to go. Because at the end of the day, when it does come down to these sort of situations, these are the times when, you can see black swans, or, potentially white swans as well, happen. So I want to be overlaying the major areas that actually matter for the long term here, so that it can be very well documented and, well, hopefully even traded off of, at least for my own purposes, and hopefully in some way useful for yourself out there if you are tuning into content like this. So we're going to start off with the hopium first. The hopium first all hinges upon basically the same things that we've been looking at for the past for the past while here. Let me pull up my hopium chart. Here's my hopium chart. The hopium chart right here, the hopium chart is only going to be hopium for long term, simply because it would actually imply that we do test downside first actually here. The thing is that Bitcoin would have a reaccumulation formation coming off the lows, that being, of course, an ascending triangle, which actually does fit the bill thus far. This idea would be completely invalidated with any sort of a medium-term time frame closure, especially below that last low that we saw in late February. That would be at about 35.5 on a closing basis, or on a daily closing basis, I would say below about 36.5 in this case. One of those two scenarios would obviously invalidate this, and it would not be, it would not be available at all, of course. So with that in mind, what would validate this as a technical reaccumulation formation, which again, it actually does fit the bill for right now. We do see declining volume going from left to right here. We do see a pair of higher lows. We'd obviously like to see another one, on this next move down, most likely, assuming that it does happen, somewhere around about, just below 38,000 bucks, let's say, or actually, in fact, the lower term time frame target, which would have been about 37.5 to 37 even. But ultimately, what would validate this with major targets to the upside long term would, of course, be the same thing as what we've been looking at before. That is going to be obviously a 4 hour closure, nothing less, above $45,000, or a daily closure above $44,500. If one of those two conditions is met, yeah, then yes, I do look for this to have a major move to the upside. We would have a technical target based off of this as a formation, and that would be pointed up towards the mid $55,000 territory. In fact, somewhere between about $55,000 to $56,000, which would be, let's just kind of mark it off right here, would come in line with our last, well, I wouldn't say our last, but one of our major breakdowns that we saw in November. Which seems like ages ago. Anyways, in that case right there, yeah, I would say that that would be relevant, but only if we get that validation. It's the same conditions that we've been looking at for the past couple weeks here. And I feel that it's important to reiterate this as Bitcoin does come down and looks like it is going to test the bottom side of this first, which I do think is a little more likely here, to be quite honest with you. But the reason why I want to kind of highlight this for a second is because, you know, you'll notice that a lot of the time, I repeat myself on these higher term time frame things. There's reasons for that. One is because very rarely do the higher term time frames change. I mean, for fuck's sake, like a weekly takes a week to just get one more tick on the board there. So naturally, you know, that picture evolves at a snail's pace. And then also, the higher term time frame setups, or the good setups just in general, they should be so obvious that they should be obvious essentially. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that when you do have a resolution of a higher term time frame pattern in this case, or any sort of a higher term time frame signal that holds its weight, it should be, you know, visible from a mile away. And in this case, it would be. Problem is that the validation for it is very, very far away. So I just want to kind of reiterate these things because you'll notice that on the higher term timeframes, while things, you know, might come easier to some people, what really is the true skill, at least in my opinion, on the higher term timeframes, is having the patience to wait for them to play out. So in this case, you know, can definitely see it right there. And of course, that would be more than a $10,000 move, maybe even more than that over time as well. And that would look obviously amazing for the Bitcoin boulas, but for right now, it's just not relevant. To top that off, if we were to see the weekly close above, we could even say like 43,000, a little bit above 43,000 bucks, which is, by the way, closing today at 7 p.m. Eastern time. That would confirm a few other things as well. It would confirm 2 drives of hidden bullish divergence come off the lows. Right now, we do not have that. Below $40,000, that is not available. Bitcoin must, by end of day, get above about 43. And here's the thing. CME already closed for the week on Friday, and we're very likely going to see whatever, you know, CME printed on spot as well. And guess what? We don't have it right there. They did not confirm. So barring any sort of a massive green deal to party before end of day today, very unlikely that does get confirmed. But if it were to, that would increase the probabilities that we do see that upside resolution. I personally would think that would be front runnable based off my own back testing, especially with that signal printing on relatively low volatility. You know, that would also have a technical target basically at around, you know, mid $50,000 territory, and actually technically more over time as well, around about 60 or so if it were validated. But again, right now it's looking rather unlikely, let's say. Anyways, let me just make sure that I'm getting everything else off right here. Okay, so we went over the hopium, we went over the validation for it, we went over the target for it, and then also there's something that I've been pulling up as of the start of this month of March, something that I always look at the beginning of the month, and this would be on the hopium side as well, is the monthly accumulation distribution indicator. The key point with this indicator is that all slope changes in both the red and green zone, so in the green zone from up to down, and the red zone from down to up, have correlated with macro shifts in direction on Bitcoin, all since the dawn of time. I marked off all of these with these green vertical bars right here, and you can, you know, quite literally just look at the chart and see very, very cleanly and quickly that these have gotten, you know, pretty much all of the highs and the lows incredibly well since the dawn of time. Anyways, we did get our first positive slope in a very long time coming into March right here. Problem is, and my sort of pushback on this would be, is that this positive slope is coming within the green zone. So it would be, if anything, more relatable to what we saw here in June 2016, where we did kind of have a same sort of slope change in that same zone. This was coming after the real big flip. I can't believe I used that fucking term. But the shift in market dynamics from bearish to bullish on the macro scale in 2015. And you can see that specific price action happened right here with correction down to the 9. Bitcoin's kind of doing something a little bit similar to that right now, although of course operating below that. But I would say that means that this particular signal right here, it's not of the same variety as the ones prior. These ones down here, this one right here, 2012, this one right here, 2015, 2019, beginning 2019, and May 2020. These were all obviously phenomenally good signals. In fact, why do I not have that marked off? That's bizarre. Must have goofed that one up, but basically be right there. And as you can see, all of these were macro cycle lows, basically phenomenal long-term buys for what it's worth. And I would say that this one, it doesn't actually fit the bill for that. I do think that it is interesting to track, and I guess we'll just kind of see as time goes on. But we'd expect that sometime before end of this month, if this is going to be legitimate, we'd expect that the daily hopium above $44,500 at a 4 hour above $45,000 would be ticked off right here. Where's my damn chart for this? I mean, they're all the same chart at this point, so fair enough. Anyways, that's sort of my hopium for right now. I do think that it's still viable, but as you can see, it's very far away from being confirmed. Anyways, we should now get into the less hopium, or first we'll go to like kind of neutrality, I suppose. Why not? You know, we can start here, you know, make it a little bit nicer. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 5-day Gaussian channel. 5-day Gaussian channel is very interesting to me right here because it essentially says that Bitcoin is either on the precipice of a major meltdown, or this is one of the last buying opportunities that you'll have for like a long-term on a major, low essentially. So I'm going to pull everything out right here, and I just want to speak off the cuff about this indicator. Basically, in its more relatable way, whenever it is green and price action is above, generally bullish, and pullbacks are to be bought. Whenever it's red and you're below, those are your more long-term, heavily corrective markets. We're talking about minimum 60%, usually on average about 70%, in fact, every time. And right now, the indicator itself is still green, but you can see that Bitcoin is literally on the precipice of closing below it, and we'll have a chance to do it tonight, actually, as we do see a 5-day closure tonight. And that will happen with any sort of a closure, especially below about $38,000. A little bit above 38 is actually technically the bottom side of this, but I'll just say 38,000 because, give it a little bit of a buffer zone right there. Anyways, if that does happen, all prior times have led to major corrections. We can see back here, 2014, 2018 right here, even more recently in 2020 as well. But for right now, it's still actually suggesting that, you'd probably be expecting a bit of a bounce right here. On top of that, if we go over to a daily, you'll notice that Bitcoin is hanging on to the bottom side of the Gaussian channel. Again, at a decision point, but typically speaking, if you want to play this one in the way that it's meant to be played, theoretically, you'd be looking for a bounce off this region with a target to the median band, which is about $41,500 right now. So what would we expect if this is going to play through? We'd expect no closing lower low than basically 38, especially like $38,500. So at 38,400. Let's make it like 38,400 just so that it's a lot more clean right there. Anyways. So that would be, it's not necessarily bullish nor bearish right now. You can still see that it has a bit of a chance right there, but ultimately, that's kind of what's at stake for the end of the day today for both the 5-day, the daily, and of course the weekly as well, of which the weekly is a bit of a rejection. We'll say a bit of a rejection right there, right? So ultimately, I do think that waiting for today's closure for clarity on that situation is going to be at least my personal route of call. Not that this is financial advice, nor am I financial advisor, just kind of, sharing what I'm looking at right now and what I make of it depending upon these closures. Anyways, now let's get into some of the more not as nice stuff, perhaps. So looking at it over here, now let's look at our higher term time frame stochastic momentum oscillators. And we see that daily stochastic is about to turn down with any sort of a closure today below 44,420. Great number right there. Also on high volatility, so you could make the argument that this is going to be a corrective move. Fair enough. We'd expect the 12 hour to be doing something relatively similar, and it is actually. So it's not a death sentence in and of itself. Here's the thing though, when we get to the 5-day and the weekly, this is where things become a lot more interesting to me. Any sort of a 5-day closure today below 39,750, again, that's happening today alongside the weekly, we will see 5-day stochastic momentum turn to the downside and also remain within the bearish control zone. So that would be a nice pivot to be aware of. So we'd expect that if Bitcoin is going to end up busting on through to the upside, that intraday today, it probably does break back above what was it, like 39. Hey, where's my damn chart? Dude, where's my chart? Here it is. Yeah, 30. Well, that's actually the 0.5 right there. So we'd essentially expect the short-term time frame resolution to happen to the upside, minimum an hourly closure above there. Right now, retracing, this last little wick move to the downside, not the best sign. Not the best sign indeed. So let's say that while it's technically on the board, it's a little bit less likely for right now. Again, I'd wait on closures myself. Anyways, that would be the 5-day, and that is what I am going to be keeping a keen eye on myself. If that does get resolved to the downside, where would it essentially imply price action or targets towards? Well, in this case, again, I do look for a move basically to the bottom side of this formation. At short-term timeframes, low $37,000, but ultimately somewhere down around about 35 to 36 is where I'd be looking for the next daily to sort of land before the next bounce or low right there. And then we get to play the game of, okay, is this Bitcoin's third higher low on the hopium ascending triangle, or is this just, another fuck you before devastation? I don't have any, there's nothing for me to say about that. It's just, price action actually has to do what it does, and then I respond to it. That's how you do it as a trader. You can't crystal ball this shit. Even no matter how much Twitter, interesting posts on Twitter I read, I still have not found a way for that to be done. Anyways, I do want to bring up this chart as well. It's still very much relevant. It is still perhaps the most damning thing for Bitcoin long term that I can find, and that is the monthly chart right here. The monthly MACD, PMAR, and just the 20 simple. So these three indicators, when combined with each other, have had a 100% hit rate in the past to produce a move all the way down to the green 55 exponential moving average. So I'll quickly go over this and then, tell you what it means for right now and how to validate a move like this. But basically, first it starts with the monthly MACD. The monthly MACD crossing to the downside has happened 3 times in Bitcoin's history, not counting our current one. And in all 3 times have then opened up the doors for the next set of criteria to be fulfilled. The PMAR getting below the moving average on this one, it doesn't have as much testing, to be fair. It doesn't have as much history right here, but just getting below, obviously the PMAR generally going to be in a long-term corrective phase, let's say. But the other most important piece alongside the MACD cross the downside of the monthly is, of course, the monthly white 20 simple on this chart here. So all of these green vertical bars correlate to the monthly MACD crossing to the downside. The next closure below the monthly 20, in this case, again, the white simple moving average right here, is when price action really started to accelerate to the downside, finding its ultimate low at the 55, a few weeks below, and does oscillate around there for a while, but ultimately that was the macro low there, of course, in 2015. Same thing over here in 2018. Bitcoin teeter-totters around the white 20 simple after getting the monthly MACD cross the downside. It closes ever so slightly below it right here in October 2018, and then, that one just fell off the face of the earth a couple months later and finds its lows in 2019. And then same thing over here in January 2020 to February 2020, right? This was right before the Rona dump. And this one actually all happened at the same time, closed below the white 20 simple and tested the 55 all in the same go. Was a bit of a, if you will, black swan, I suspect. But right now you can see that Bitcoin is kind of doing the same thing here. We've already got the monthly MACD cross to the downside. We've already seen the PMAR cross to the downside of the moving average right there as well. And, Bitcoin is, fighting for its dear life at the 38,500-ish region after already getting the backfill from last month open. So ultimately, I look at that one, not relevant for today or tomorrow. Obviously, it does operate on a monthly closure. So we still have another 4 weeks almost to go. March just started, but if Bitcoin does start to close below there, that's at the point where I do start to entertain the possibilities that not only is a test down to $30,000 quite likely, but a test to the 55 here at about almost just below $24,000 is very likely as well. So that's kind of what's at stake for the higher term timeframes. Again, I would say that is completely invalidated if we do see this upside trajectory validated here above $44,500. Until then, the only thing that I think would make me, the only thing in the short-term timeframes from our current stance that would make me consider that, this is, I guess, your next higher low right here, which probably not going to happen right here. If it is going to happen, it probably comes down a little bit more towards mid to low 37, but would be with at fucking minimum to be 100% directly clear with the 4-hour closure above 41,000 and about 600 right here. If that starts to happen, you know, I would be looking at this as a bit of a short-term bear trap with upside, you know, implied, and probably does actually bust on through the top side if it does test this, you know, 45,000-ish region yet again, thus validating those major targets to the upside. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I know that this video was a little bit shorter for a long-term analysis video, but I just wanted to include the most relevant things. We can briefly go over the underlying market dynamics right here, of which the global open interest, you know, I'm basically tracking this not with like a major target in mind, but simply, or sorry, not with like a major concern with it in mind, but simply just looking at targeted regions, of which I have alerts right here for these both above and below. So below about 9 billion, I look at that as, you know, probably going to be a nice, at least a nice bounce point on price action if we do get down around there, you know, assuming that it does come along downside price action, which typically it does. And to the upside above specifically 14 billion, although I would like to be aware when it gets above 13 billion, that would also naturally make me a little bit more skeptical on current price action, thus looking for very likely a major pullback to the tune of, you know, 10 to, or probably more like around 20% going off of the history of this. On top of that, another thing that's a little bit more on the boo law side is the funding rates are negative. Now, we expect negative funding rates in a general downside market. Hourly funding rates are same as well, nice and negative right there. Not anything super concerning, obviously, but would be more on the bullish side. Then again, it is a weekend, so, you know, take that to your own, you know, take that in your own, of course. But that, you know, that would be still, that could still align with the short-term downside move, fulfill that next higher low on the daily, and that would, you know, and that can still play out over the long term. So I don't want to rule the bulls out here, but it does need to be said, or at least for myself, it needs to be said, the whole boo law hopium gets absolutely boo-caked. Where's my damn chart with this one? Here it is. Below about, let's just call it $36,000 on a medium or higher term time frame closure. Until then, it's still available. I think that it's actually rather likely to test somewhere down around there, let's say low 37, if it is going to happen. And then I'd be expecting another higher low somewhere around there, again, on a closing basis. Anyways, is there anything else I want to get over here? Yeah, fear and greed index, obviously, you know, going to be in the extremely fearful zone. This is starting to look a lot more different than anything I've seen basically since 2018. So, you know, maybe that's a sign as well. But in this case right here, you know, we can see that just getting, you know, back to neutral. It's actually so interesting how this has been working. It's actually been incredibly accurate. Basically getting back to neutral sentiment within the market has marked off Bitcoin's, you know, next highs essentially. And a lot of the lows have been obviously within the extremely fearful zone. But this, again, you know, typically speaking, you're supposed to buy the fear, right? But, you know, fear can stay low for a long time while price action continues to slow down. So it's never going to be a good idea to just look at that in like exclusion of anything else, which I see a lot of the time. I always see people like post this fucking Bitcoin fear and greed or Ethereum fear and greed, and they're like, buy the, and then like a quote from Warren Buffett, like, you should buy when others are fearful, or buy when there's blood in the streets, even if it's your own. Yeah, okay, well, backtest that and tell me how it fucking works out, because I can assure you that I have, and just blindly doing that, not very profitable, sirs and sirs. Anyways, I think that's a good place for me to sign off. I think that we got all of the major key points here. Hopefully this was in some way helpful. And with that said, take care and see you hopefully very soon.